The storm didn't start with the headlines. It started in silence, with a boy in a diary. Early October in London was already grim, but that morning the city seemed colder. Mist rolled through the palace gardens like it carried secrets, and in the heart of Kensington Palace, Prince William sat frozen in place, staring at a headline that felt like a blade. "The heir fears the crown." Those 6 words screamed from every newsstand, etched in bold across newspapers from Soho to Westminster. The quote, taken straight from Prince George's private diary, wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. For the first time in decades, the monarchy looked fragile through the eyes of a child. Worse, someone had leaked it. And William, a father before anything else, could feel every line cut into him like fire. The privacy of his 12-year-old son violated. His fears mocked across the country. But what hit the hardest wasn't just the betrayal. It was the dinner. Clarence House, just one night earlier, had been set like any other formal royal gathering. Chandeliers flickered gently, velvet drapes framed the windows, and every fork, every plate was placed with military precision. But no preparation could have softened what happened when Camilla opened her mouth. She looked right at George, right at the child. Then she smirked and said the words that still echoed in William's mind. A prince afraid of the throne, just like his father. The entire room froze. Kate clutched George's hand under the table, trying to protect him from the sting. George looked up confused, his face pale, his voice cracking as he whispered, "What?" But Camilla didn't stop. She smiled wider and kept going, calling the boy weak, suggesting he didn't deserve the crown. Even now, remembering it, William felt the heat rise in his chest. He hadn't shouted then, but inside, a vow had been made, and now, with this headline and the leak confirmed, William wasn't just angry, he was on the edge. He knew Camilla's smirk wasn't innocent. The leak wasn't random. Someone had stolen that diary. Someone close enough to find it, and someone cruel enough to turn a child's private thoughts into ammunition. The palace wasn't safe. And if Camilla was bold enough to humiliate George in front of family, what else was she capable of? Later that day, William entered George's room. The boy sat on his bed, quiet, hugging a teddy bear, his eyes still swollen. William knelt in front of him and asked, "Where did you last see your diary?" George hesitated, then spoke. "I think I left it in my bag near the rose bushes. I was writing and then Charlotte and Louis came. I thought I locked it, but maybe I didn't." That was enough. William's gut twisted. The garden had cameras. He raced to the palace's basement where James, an old friend from MI5, kept a watchful eye on everything digital. With tense silence, they reviewed footage. Hours of it, and then, boom, there she was, Camilla. Green dress, pearls shining, calmly walking past the garden bench, glancing both ways like a trained thief. And then she did it. She opened George's bag, pulled out the diary, and flipped through it with a cold smile, a predator's smirk. Then she tucked it into her cloak like it was nothing and walked off. William didn't speak. He couldn't. All the anger, all the grief tightened into one icy thought. She had touched his son. This wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. Now he had the proof. Now he had the fire. And Camilla had no idea the clock was ticking. Not just for her secret, but for her entire game. Buckingham Palace had never felt heavier, not even during royal funerals or political crises. Inside the Grand Hall, where decisions were once sealed with wax and blood, Queen Camilla stood alone as judgment settled like dust in the air. King Charles, usually reserved in conflict, had said the words himself, calmly, but with the weight of centuries behind them. "You are to remain at Clarence House, effective immediately. No contact with the children, no involvement with my son's family affairs." Camilla didn't argue. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder. Her eyes didn't flicker with regret, only calculation. She turned and left the chamber, her heels echoing through the stone hallway, not like a queen in exile, but like someone retreating to redraw the map. At Kensington Palace, William stood by the window in George's room. Outside, the rose bushes glistened with morning dew. George sat beside him on the bed, clutching a warm mug of cocoa, eyes still shadowed by recent events. His voice was quiet. "She's gone? For now," William said. "But she won't come near you again. That's a promise." George gave a small nod, leaning slightly into his father's side. William placed a hand gently on his back. For all the titles, for all the centuries of royal blood, none of it mattered more than this moment between a father and his son. But deep in William's mind, a storm brewed. This wasn't the end. Not with someone like Camilla. She'd lost control. But people like her didn't vanish. They retreated, adapted, waited. At Clarence's house, Camilla sat in her private drawing room, the firelight casting long shadows across her face. She stared into the flames, her fingers gently tracing the rim of her wine glass. The press had caught wind of the scandal. Headlines were cautious but damning. Private diary leaks sparks palace upheaval. Prince William confronts betrayal in royal council. The monarchy's dirty laundry had been aired, just not the way she'd planned. She had underestimated William. That was her mistake. She had assumed he'd act emotionally, lash out, stumble. Instead, he'd waited, gathered proof, and struck when it mattered most. A clean, surgical takedown. Still, Camilla wasn't broken, just bruised. She stared at the pearl necklace on her table, the one she'd worn to the council meeting, the very one she'd once believed would be her armor. Now it looked like a relic of a battle lost. Her lips curled into a cold smile. Let them think they've won. At Kensington, William met with James in the quiet of his study. The footage was now backed up in multiple secure locations. Any attempt to twist the narrative would fail, but William wasn't planning to release it to the public, not yet. The palace needed peace, and George needed time to heal. James tapped the folder on the table. Camilla's network inside the palace isn't small. She still has ears. I know, Willem replied. That's why I want them to think I'm done. He stared at the map of royal estates spread across his desk. Not for strategy, for protection. From now on, he said, George is never without security. And I want every corner of this place swept regularly. No more blind spots. James nodded. In the distance, Big Ben chimed noon. William returned to George's room, where the boy was now asleep, a sketchbook resting on his chest, a drawing of a crown, surrounded by clouds, half finished. William sat by the bed quietly, watching his son breathe. No crown, no kingdom, no centuries-old tradition would ever come before this boy again. He looked out toward the gardens, where truth had bloomed like a blade through thorns. Camilla had made her move, he had answered, and if she ever dared again, he would be ready.